Jewish entity. But I never considered racism as part of our life. Because even asking my family at the family reunion in San Francisco, I had my uncle, my aunts, my cousins. Everybody was there, their children, their children's children. We were all having a family reunion. And I was asking questions, you know, I'm living in America here. How was life for you back in Palestine? Now you have Yasser Arafat. You're supposed to be happy. You have somewhat of a state now. How was life for you back in the Palestinian areas? Well, my uncle says life is miserable. I says, why is it miserable? He began to tell me how Yasser Arafat and the PA really abused people, had a monopoly over businesses, you know, territorial monopolies. The PLO was very dictatorial. I said, well, how was your life in comparison with your life under the Israeli occupation? I remember what they said. They said, well, under the occupation, those were the good old days. I said, excuse me, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What do you mean the good old days? Those were the good old days. Life was good. There was tourism. There was money to be made. Education. Everything was good at those times. Now it's really, really miserable. I said, why don't you speak out? And my uncle says, that's a stupid question. I said, why is it a stupid question? He says, you know very well, Walid, that we will never accept the Jews to rule over us. I said, excuse me? Then the issue is not an issue of a state or land, it's racism. I began to understand racism. One Palestinian was asked the question, if all the Jews converted to Islam, will we still have an Arab-Israeli war? And the answer was, of course, no. But then the question is, it's not an issue of land, is it? It's an issue of Jews ruling over land that was waqf at one point in time. It was a waqf territory. It belonged to Islam because Umar ibn al-Khattab had occupied it at one point. It is a Muslim land. In fact, historically speaking, I began to realize after I began to study history for a change that the Arabs, and those are the best historians you can find, the Arabs ruled that land you call Judea less than 100 years. Less than 100 years, the Arabs ruled Judea, that land. All of it was Mamluks, it was the Ottomans, it was the Romans, it was the Crusades. So it was the, you know, so why not establish an Ottoman state or a Crusader state or a Roman state? Why an Arab Palestinian Muslim state? And this has been my argument from a long time ago, that this idea of creating the state called Palestine is going to end up not a mini America, but it's going to end up as a mini Iran. In fact, I was in Fox News one time and I was sitting there and I had a discussion with one of the Fox News teams over this issue. And he says, for your information, I always supported a Palestinian state. What's the name of that guy in Fox News? Big mustache. Somebody can. Geraldo Rivera, yes. Well, he says, what are you in for? He says, I'm a Palestinian. I came to have an interview with Bill O'Reilly. And he says, you're Palestinian? I said, yes, I'm Palestinian. He said, for your information, I always have supported the Palestinian state. I said, excuse me, you're talking to the only person who doesn't support the Palestinian state. I said, Mr. Rivera, I'll be glad to make a bet with you. This was before the Hamas election, before the elections, before even Hamas even came to power in Gaza, before. I said, I have a bet to make with you. I said, it's going to be an election there, and we're going to have a Hamasistan. It's going to be an Islamist state. It's going to be a very oppressive state. There'll be no rights for women, no freedom of speech. I'm willing to make a bet with you for $1 million that Hamas will be victorious before the elections. And would you make that bet with me? He said, of course not. I said, why? It seems, Mr. Rivera, you know the facts already. And you look at the news, you look at everything that's happening, the facts are so clear what has evolved as a result of that state. But there's nobody in this politically correct world that could stand up with some guts to say what we have now is not a state, but what we have now is indeed a state of psychosis. It's a state of psychosis in which you see two Jews getting lost in Ramallah, and they being lynched, thrown out the window, which is really, if you think about it, it happens in every culture. I mean, people kill people in every culture. Okay, well, somebody's going to object and says, Walid, you know, murders happen all the time. But the difference between our culture and your culture is that in your culture, if such event happened, you don't have the entire men of Ramallah standing there in the middle of the square in Ramallah on photo, in film, praising as loud as they can, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. You don't have this kind of culture here where you see body parts and internals and intestines in a platter in which the children are coming and carrying pieces of the body parts, praising Allah in a euphoric fashion. That doesn't exist in this culture, but it exists in mine. I mean, after Israel left, and nobody wants to have the guts to say it, my country has become the night of the living dead, literally. Not allegoric, literal. People, bodies being dragged in the streets of Bethlehem and Ramallah and everywhere. People being lynched upside down for their support to Israel. In fact, I have 5 minutes to live right now if I decided to go back to my country. 5 minutes. Why? Because I simply changed my religion. I simply stopped believing that Allah is God and Muhammad is the Prophet of Allah. I am a kafir. As a kafir, I must die. In fact, I remember when I began to express my views to my family, I got a phone call. We always get a phone call. I got a phone call from my brother. He says, I talked to your uncle back home. You have no more land. Your land is gone. Confiscated. I said, by what right? I have the deed to my land. I purchased it with my own money. He says, you've changed your religion. If you want your land back, you must go back to Bethlehem court, Sharia law, and declare the Shahadatan. Go back to Islam, or else you will lose all your land. So I had a follow-up question and answer time. I said, then the Jews didn't steal my land. All my life, the Jews stole our land. All my life, I knew very well that Al-Husseini sold land to the Jewish National Fund. My grandfather sold land to the Jewish National Fund. The Supreme Muslim Council sold land to the Jewish National Fund. Yasser Arafat's uncle sold land to the Jewish National Fund. My grandfather was going to be executed for selling land to the Jewish National Fund by Haj-Ameen, by Abdul Qader Al-Husseini, the leader of the Palestinian Revolution, for selling land to Jews way before the establishment of the State of Israel. The Jews didn't steal my land, you stole my land. I began to realize that in my culture, you can't change your mind. I changed my mind and I want to speak at a university. And the Muslim Student Association went up in arms. Why? In Michigan, the Muslim Student Association issued edicts, leaflets outside, how I'm such a false guy, how I'm made up, I'm a Zionist conspirator, I'm a lying, fabricating liar. In fact, they said even the mentor of Walid Shu'aibat, I was mentored in the United States of America by Jamal Saeed. I don't know how many of you know Jamal Saeed. He's been said to be a colleague of Abdullah Azzam, the mentor of Osama bin Laden, who's free in Chicago right now. He's free. Bridgeview Mosque raised funds for Hamas. I have him on video. All the truth is the truth. And they said, there is no Jamal Saeed, it doesn't even exist. I said, if you get your spelling correct, it's Jamal-Said, Saeed, not Sayed. You would Google the name and you'd find out for yourselves. Till today, they haven't even issued an apology for their mistakes. I don't know what to say. Basically, in 1993, I began, 1991 actually, 1991, something began to change about my life. I took a trip to Israel. I wanted to visit home. Here I was a Muslim sitting in the plane, and next to me was a Jewish lady. I didn't want her to even know that I was a Palestinian. I never really talked to a Jew all my life living